I was holding an envelope containing the deed to a $2 million lake house. It was a wedding gift. Then I saw the seating chart. They didn't list me as Grandma, they listed me as the ATM. They thought it was a funny inside joke. Well, I have a sense of humor too, so I put the deed back in my purse, and I handed them an invoice for $1.3 million instead. Hello, ladies. Pull up a chair and let me pour you some tea, because today we are talking about the kind of heartbreak that does not come from a cheating husband or a bad diagnosis. No, this heartbreak comes from the people you bounced on your knee and sang lullabies to. We all want to believe that our families love us for our cookies and our wisdom, don't we? We want to believe that if the money ran out tomorrow, they would still come over for Sunday dinner. But honey, sometimes you have to look in the mirror and admit that you raised a pack of wolves. And the only thing wolves care about is how much meat is left on the bone. This is the story of Eleanor, a woman who spent 40 years balancing the books for a Fortune 500 company, only to realize the biggest fraud was happening right in her own living room. It was 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, and the air smelled like expensive perfume and roasted garlic. I walked into the lobby of the Sapphire Room, which is the most expensive restaurant in the city. I know it is the most expensive, because I wrote the check for the deposit 3 months ago. I was wearing my best navy silk suit, and the pearl necklace my husband Arthur gave me for our 30th anniversary. I felt good. I felt proud. My granddaughter Lexi was getting married the next day, and I was about to give her the deed to the lake house as a wedding gift. It was a property worth $2 million. It was the family jewel. I looked around the room. It was filled with white lilies and crystal candelabras. My son Brad was over by the bar, laughing with a drink in his hand. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, even if it was a little tight around the middle. He waved at me, but he didn't come over. He just pointed to his glass and mouthed the word thanks. I smiled back. I told myself it was enough. My daughter-in-law Camilla was holding court near the entrance. She was wearing a silver dress that was probably a little too young for her, but she looked striking. She was telling a group of Lexi's friends about the honeymoon to Bora Bora, a honeymoon I had paid for last week. I walked up to the large easel that held the seating chart for the rehearsal dinner. It was a beautiful thing, thick cream cardstock with gold calligraphy. I put on my reading glasses to find my name. I scanned the top table. The bride, the groom, the parents of the bride, the parents of the groom. I looked for Eleanor Vance, or maybe Grandma Ellie. I looked at the second table, the bridesmaids, the groomsmen. I looked at the third table, the distant cousins, the college friends. I felt a little flutter of panic in my chest. Had they forgotten me? Surely not. I was the host. Technically speaking, I was the one paying the bill for every shrimp cocktail in the room. Then I saw it. It was at the very bottom of the chart, table 9, the table by the kitchen door where they usually put the people they didn't know what to do with. There was no Eleanor Vance. Instead, in that beautiful swirling gold calligraphy were the words. The ATM. I froze. I blinked and cleaned my glasses, thinking maybe it was a smudge. Maybe it was a trick of the light. I looked again. The ATM. My breath caught in my throat like I had swallowed a piece of ice. I looked around the room to see if anyone else was seeing this. 2 of Lexi's bridesmaids were standing near the chart giggling. They pointed at the name and whispered to each other. Did you see what Lexi put for her grandma? One of them whispered, yeah, that is savage. The other one laughed. But I mean, is it wrong? She is paying for literally everything. It is hilarious, the first one said. Lexi said the old lady wouldn't even notice because she is practically blind anyway. They laughed again. A cruel sharp sound that cut right through the noise of the party. I stood there frozen. My feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. The ATM, that was who I was to them, not the woman who paid for Lexi's private school when Brad lost his job, not the woman who bought Camilla her first car because she said the bus was unsafe, not the woman who held their hands when Arthur died. I was a machine that spit out money when they punched in the right code. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped. It was Brad. "Hey Mom," he said. He smelled like scotch. "Did you find your seat?" I pointed at the chart. My finger was shaking. "Brad," I whispered, "what is this?" He looked at the chart. He squinted. Then he let out a loud bark of a laugh. "Oh, that." He chuckled. "Come on, Mom. It is just a joke. You know Lexi. She has a modern sense of humor. It is ironic." "Ironic," I repeated. "Yeah." Brad clapped me on the back. "Don't be so sensitive. Everyone knows you are the moneybags." It is affectionate, like a nickname, affectionate. I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I had raised. I saw the weakness in his chin and the glaze in his eyes. He didn't see a problem. He didn't see the disrespect. He just saw a funny joke at the expense of the woman who had funded his entire adult life. "I need to sit down," I said. My voice sounded hollow to my own ears. "Sure, sure." Brad said, "Table 9 is right back there. It is a little close to the service station, but Lexi wanted the young people up front for the photos. You understand, right? You don't want to ruin the aesthetic." The aesthetic? He steered me toward the back of the room like I was a piece of furniture that needed to be moved. He sat me down at a table with two of the groom's second cousins who I had never met. They nodded at me and went back to their phones. I sat there in my silk suit. I touched the pearls at my throat. I felt cold, bone-deep cold. You know, ladies, they say listeners never hear good of themselves. But I was not expecting to hear my own obituary being planned while I sat on a toilet seat. I held my breath. I pulled my feet up so they wouldn't see my navy pumps under the stall door. I sat there like a spy in my own life, listening to the two women I had loved more than anything in the world. "Did you see her face when she saw the chart?" Lexi asked. Her voice was high and mocking. She looked like she was going to have a stroke, right there in the lobby. Camilla laughed. It was a dry hacking sound. "Oh, ignore her. She is just being dramatic. She loves playing the martyr. It makes her feel important. Besides, she will get over it. She always does." I squeezed my eyes shut. The martyr. Is that what they called the woman who paid the mortgage? "I just hope she doesn't make a scene tomorrow," Lexi said. I heard the sound of lipstick being applied. I heard the smack of lips. I need everything to be perfect. If she starts crying about grandpa or something, I am going to lose it. "She won't," Camilla said soothingly. "We just have to keep her happy until the toast. That is when she is supposed to give us the deed to the lake house." "Remember." "I know, Mom," Lexi sighed, "but are you sure she is actually going to do it? She has been weird lately, asking questions about the wedding budget, looking at receipts." Camilla snorted. "She is just being a busybody. She is senile, Lexi. She forgets things. She probably forgot she already promised it to us. Just smile at her. Tell her she looks pretty in her old lady suit. Once we have that deed, it doesn't matter what she thinks." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and angry. "What are we going to do with the house anyway?" Lexi asked. "I don't want to go to the lake. There are mosquitoes." "We are selling it, obviously," Camilla said. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen to me. Your father and I have some liquidity issues. The business isn't doing well. We need the cash from that sale to float us for the next few years. Selling it, My heart hammered against my ribs. That house was built by Arthur with his own 2 hands. We wanted it to stay in the family for generations, and they were going to sell it to pay off credit cards and bad investments. Well, hurry up and get it, Lexi said. And honestly, how much longer is she going to be around? She is 70, she coughs all the time. Camilla laughed again. Don't worry, honey, she can't last forever. We just have to wait her out. It is a waiting game, and we are winning. We are winning. That was the sentence that did it. That was the moment the sadness evaporated, and something else took its place. Something cold and hard and sharp. It felt like the steel spine I used to have when I was negotiating mergers in the 80s. They weren't my family. They were vultures circling a carcass that wasn't even dead yet. I heard the door open. I heard their heels clicking away. Let's go get a drink, Lexi said. I need a martini before I have to go hug her again. They left. The bathroom was silent. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation fan. I put my feet down. I stood up. I unlocked the stall door and walked to the sink. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw an old woman with gray hair and a tired face. I saw the wrinkles. I saw the fear. Then I washed my face. I scrubbed off the tear tracks. I reapplied my red lipstick. It was a shade called Victory Red. I looked at myself again. You are not a carcass, Eleanor, I whispered to my reflection. You are the chief financial officer, and you have just discovered a massive discrepancy in the accounts. I didn't go back to the party. I didn't go back to table 9 to eat rubber chicken with the second cousins. I walked out the side door of the restaurant. I called a taxi. I went home to my quiet, empty house. But I didn't go to bed. I didn't cry into my pillow. I went to my study. I turned on the green banker's lamp on my desk. I pulled out the heavy leather-bound ledgers, where I kept track of every single penny I had given them over the last 10 years. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I was going to conduct an audit. They thought I was senile. They thought I didn't notice the receipts. They thought I was just the ATM. Well, I opened the first ledger. The pages crackled. If they want to treat me like a bank, then I am going to act like a bank. And banks do not forgive debts. They collect them. Honey, let me tell you something about numbers. People lie. They lie to their spouses. They lie to their priests. They even lie to themselves in the mirror. But numbers never lie. A number is the most honest thing on God's green earth. If you spend $5, you have $5 less. It is simple. It is brutal. And that night, sitting in my study with only the hum of the refrigerator for company, I was about to get a very brutal education in the mathematics of betrayal. I took off my pearl necklace and laid it on the desk next to the stack of ledgers. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, no sugar. I needed the bitter taste to keep me sharp. I opened the first book, Family Support 2019 to 2023. I had always been meticulous. Arthur taught me that. He used to say, Eleanor, you can be generous, but you must never be blind. Well, Arthur, I had been blind. I had been walking around with my eyes wide shut. I started with Brad, my son, the boy who used to bring me dandelions. Item 1, March 12th, business loan for inventory expansion, $50,000. Brad had told me his consulting firm was taking off. He said he needed capital for new software and office space. I wrote the check without blinking. I believed in him. I pulled up his credit card statement on my laptop. I had access because I was the guarantor. I had never looked at the itemized list before. I usually just paid the balance. March 14th, Porsche dealership of West Palm Beach, down payment, $45,000. I stared at the screen. He didn't buy software. He bought a midlife crisis on wheels, and I paid for it. Item 2, Camilla, emergency medical procedure, $15,000. She had come to me crying. She said it was a gynecological issue, something private. She didn't want to worry Brad. I checked the dates, June 4th to June 10th. I opened the American Express statement, June 4th, the Sanctuary Spa and Cosmetic Surgery Center, Scottsdale, Arizona. She didn't have a medical emergency, she had a facelift. She used my concern for her health to fund her vanity. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I was the CFO now and I was looking for the bottom line. I turned the page to Lexi, my granddaughter, the influencer. Item 3, study abroad program at Sorbonne University, $20,000. She sent me photos of the Eiffel Tower. She sent me photos of books. I dug through the receipts in the shoebox I kept under the desk. I found the transfer confirmation. It didn't go to a university. It went to a travel agency called Lux Escapes. I went to Lexi's Instagram page. I scrolled back 2 years. There she was. Not in a library, not in a classroom. She was on a yacht in the Mediterranean holding a bottle of champagne. The caption read, "Living my best life." Hashtag self-made, self-made. I laughed out loud in the empty house. It was a harsh, dry sound. She was self-made with my checkbook. I worked through the night. I went through 5 years of loans and gifts and emergencies. The house renovation that never happened. The investment in a tech startup that didn't exist. The car repairs for cars that were under warranty. I added it all up. The calculator tape grew longer and longer. It curled off the desk and hit the floor. It coiled around my feet like a snake. I looked at the final number. $1,400,000. That was how much they had siphoned off me in 5 years. And that wasn't enough. They wanted the lake house too. They wanted the $2 million property that Arthur built with his own hands. And why did they want it? Because they were broke. I looked at their debt-to-income ratios. I looked at the mortgages on their own house. They were underwater. They were drowning in debt to keep up appearances. And they were using me as the life raft. The ATM, it wasn't a joke. It was a business model. I sat back in my leather chair. My eyes burned. My back ached. But my mind was crystal clear. They were running a Ponzi scheme, and I was the only investor. I looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. Most grandmothers are asleep at 3 a.m. Most grandmothers are dreaming of their grandchildren's weddings. But I wasn't a grandmother anymore. I was a creditor, and my clients were in default. I picked up the phone. I knew exactly who to call. There is a man named Mr. Henderson who runs the private client services at my bank. He handles the accounts that have more than 2 commas in them. He answers his phone at any hour for clients like me. I dialed the number. Eleanor. His voice was thick with sleep but alert. Is everything all right? It's 3 in the morning. Hello, James, I said. My voice was steady. I apologize for the hour, but we have a situation. Is it fraud? He asked. Yes, I said, it is fraud, but not the kind you are thinking of. James the First needs you to do something for me. I need you to prepare a document, and I need you to execute a foreclosure. A foreclosure? On who? On the Oak Ridge property, I said, my son's house. There was silence on the line. Eleanor, James said slowly, you hold the private mortgage on that house. You effectively own the note. If you foreclose, you are evicting your own son. I know, I said, and James, I also need you to stop payment on the check for the wedding venue. The wedding is today, Eleanor. The check is scheduled to clear at noon. Stop it, I commanded. Freeze it. Freeze everything. The credit cards, the supplementary accounts, the allowances. Shut it all down, Eleanor. James sounded worried now. This is the nuclear option. Are you sure? I looked at the calculator tape on the floor. I looked at the seating chart in my mind. The ATM, I am sure, James, I said. I am closing the branch. James was silent on the other end of the line for a long time. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the faint click of a keyboard as he probably pulled up my accounts to see if I had lost my mind. The wedding venue check. James said slowly, Eleanor, if I stop payment on that, the hotel manager is going to pull the plug. They might lock the doors before the bride even walks down the aisle. No, I said, they won't. I know the manager, Mr. Ricci. I will call him personally. I will tell him to let the event proceed on credit until 8 p.m., but at 8 p.m., when the final bill is due, my card will decline, and the responsibility will fall to the cosigners. The cosigners, Brad and Camilla, I said. They signed the vendor contracts. I just put up the credit. When my credit disappears, the debt reverts to them. Eleanor, this is calculated destruction. It is an audit, James. I corrected him. I am simply balancing the books. Now about the cars, the Porsche, I said, and Lexi's Range Rover. I hold the titles. They are leased under my name with them as authorized drivers. I want them repossessed. When, today, I said, during the reception, I want the tow trucks waiting in the parking lot of the Sapphire Room. When I give the signal, I want those cars gone. James sighed. It was the heavy sigh of a man who knew better than to argue with a hurricane. I will set it up, he said. The foreclosure on Brad's house, the asset freeze, the repossessions, it will all be ready to execute by noon. Thank you, James. Go back to sleep. I hung up the phone. The sun was starting to peek through the blinds of my study. It was a gray, watery light. My eyes felt gritty like I had sand in them. I hadn't slept a wink, but I wasn't tired. I was running on pure high-octane rage. I had one last document to prepare. I opened a fresh document on my computer. I centered the title invoice. I began to type. I didn't use flowery language. I didn't write a speech about betrayal or heartache. I wrote down the numbers. Item 1. Unauthorized vehicle purchase Porsche 911. $45,000. Item 2. Cosmetic surgery disguised as medical emergency. $15,000. Item 3. Study abroad yacht charter. $20,000. Item 4. Cumulative living expenses 2019 to 2024. $1,320,000. I listed it all, every lie, every stolen dollar. Then I went to the bottom of the page, total due. Immediate repayment, payment method. Liquidation of assets. I printed it out on thick cream-colored linen paper, the same paper I used for my resumes back in the day. It felt heavy, it felt substantial. Then I opened the safe behind the painting of the ship in the storm. I pulled out the deed to the lake house, the real deed. I looked at it for a moment. I remembered Arthur teaching Brad how to fish off the dock. I remembered Lexi chasing fireflies in the jar. I remembered the life I thought I had. I put the deed back in the safe and locked it. I took the invoice and folded it neatly. I placed it inside a large velvet-lined envelope. It was the kind of envelope you used to give a grand gift. It looked like it held a deed. It felt like it held a deed, but it held a bomb. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was 7 a.m., a text from Camilla. Good morning, Mom. Big day. Just checking you have the special package ready for the toast. Lexi is so excited. See you at the hotel at 10 for photos. Hugs and kisses. I stared at the screen. Hugs and kisses from the woman who called me a carcass. I typed back. I have it right here. It's safe. See you soon. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked to the window and looked out at my garden. The hydrangeas were blooming. They didn't care about money. They didn't care about status. They just grew because I watered them. I went upstairs to my bedroom. I showered and washed the audit off my skin. I put on my makeup. I put on the pale blue dress they expected me to wear. The sweet grandmother costume. I looked in the mirror. I practiced my smile. I made my eyes crinkle at the corners. I made my posture soften, slumping just a little to look frail. You are Eleanor Vance. I whispered to the glass. You survived the crash of '87. You survived the dot-com bubble. You survived the death of the love of your life. I picked up the velvet envelope. You can survive a wedding. I walked downstairs, my heels clicking on the hardwood. I grabbed my purse. I checked to make sure I had the key to the safe, my phone and the invoice. I opened the front door. The morning air was crisp. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful day for a wedding, and it was a beautiful day for a reckoning. Ladies, have you ever walked into a room where everyone hates you, but they are all smiling like they just won the lottery? It is a very specific kind of tension. It feels like the air before a thunderstorm. It feels electric and dangerous. That is exactly what it felt like when I walked into the bridal suite at the Sapphire Hotel at 10 o'clock that morning. The room smelled like industrial-strength hairspray and nervous sweat. There were bridesmaids running around in pink silk robes. There were makeup artists wielding brushes like weapons. And in the center of it all, sitting on a throne of pillows, was Lexi. She didn't look like a blushing bride. She looked like a general commanding troops. She was barking orders at a poor girl who was trying to steam the veil. "You are wrinkling it," Lexi screamed. "Get away from me. You are incompetent." I stood in the doorway clutching my purse with both hands. I made sure my shoulders were hunched. I made sure my hand trembled just a little. I was playing the part of the frail old grandmother to perfection. Camilla spotted me first. She was wearing a mother of the bride robe that looked more like a ball gown. Her eyes went straight to my hands. She wasn't looking at my manicure. She was looking for the velvet envelope. "Mom," Camilla cried out. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "You made it." She rushed over and gave me a hug that was as warm as a block of ice. She squeezed my arms. I think she was checking to see if I was real or if I had finally turned into dust. "You look lovely, dear," I said. My voice was soft. I pitched it a little higher than usual. Just like a confused old lady, Camilla pulled back. Her eyes were hard. "Did you bring it?" "Bring what, dear?" I asked, blinking innocently. "The gift, Mom," Camilla hissed. She lowered her voice and looked around. "The surprise. The paperwork. For the lake house." "Oh." I patted my purse. "Yes. I have it right here. It is safe and sound." Camilla let out a breath she must have been holding since Tuesday. Thank God. Lexi is a wreck. She really needs this boost today. "Can we see it?" I pulled the heavy velvet envelope out just a little bit. The gold tassel caught the light. It looked expensive. It looked official. "Not yet," I said, pulling it back. "I want to give it to her during the toast. You know how Arthur loved a big reveal. I want to see the look on her face when she opens it in front of everyone." Camilla looked annoyed. She reached for the purse. "Mom, just give it to us now. We can pretend later. We need to make sure the signatures are correct." I pulled away. "No, no." I insisted. "I promised Arthur I would do it right. At the toast. It is tradition." Camilla glared at me. For a second I thought she was going to tackle me and rip the purse from my hands, but then she remembered the role she was playing, the loving daughter-in-law. "Fine," she snapped, "but don't lose it. And don't forget where you put it. You know how you get." "I know how I get," I repeated, forgetful. Lexi saw us then. She waved a makeup brush at me. "Grandma," she shouted, "did you bring the checkbook?" The makeup artist says she needs the balance paid before she finishes my eyes. I looked at my granddaughter. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't say hello. She asked for the checkbook. I walked over to her. I opened my purse. I didn't take out the checkbook. I took out a single $20 bill. Here you go, sweetheart, I said. Buy yourself a lipstick. Lexi stared at the bill like it was a dirty tissue. What is this? She asked. It is for luck, I said, smiling. Lexi rolled her eyes. Mom, she yelled. Grandma is being weird again. Handle the makeup artist. Camilla rushed over. She pulled out her own credit card, the one that was linked to my account, the one James had frozen at 8 a.m. this morning. She handed it to the makeup artist. Just put it on this, she said dismissively, and hurry up. We have photos in 10 minutes. I watched the makeup artist take the card. I watched her swipe it through the little square reader on her phone. I held my breath. The little machine let out a sharp beep. It was a nasty sound, a sound of rejection. The makeup artist frowned and looked at the screen. It declined, she said. Her voice was flat. She held the card out to Camilla like it was a piece of trash. Camilla laughed. It was a breathless, high-pitched sound. Don't be silly. That is a black card. It has no limit. Try it again. It must be your Wi-Fi. The girl shrugged and swiped it again. Beep. Declined. She said, Do you have another form of payment? I have another bride in 40 minutes. I need to leave. Camilla snatched the card back. She stared at it as if the plastic had personally insulted her. She turned to me. Her eyes were wild. Mom, she hissed. Did you forget to pay the bill? Why is the card declining? I blinked behind my glasses. I patted my chest. The bill, I asked vaguely. Oh dear, I thought James handled that. Or maybe, did I pay the electric company twice? I get so confused with the online banking these days, all those passwords. Camilla let out a growl of frustration. She pulled out her own personal card, the one that wasn't linked to me, the one that was probably maxed out on shoes and Pilates classes. Here, she shoved it at the girl. Use this. The girl swiped it. Beep. Insufficient funds, she said. The room went deadly silent. The bridesmaids stopped giggling. Lexi looked up from her phone. She looked at her mother with pure disgust. Mom, Lexi snapped. You are embarrassing me. Fix it. Camilla was sweating. Now, I could see the damp patches forming under the arms of her expensive silk robe. She looked at me. She looked at the velvet envelope in my purse. Mom, she whispered, we need that envelope. Does it have a check in it? We need cash. Now. I clutched the purse tighter. No, I said. It is the deed. It is the house. You can't pay a makeup artist with a house deed, Camilla. Camilla looked like she was going to scream. I decided to throw her a lifeline that was actually a noose. Why don't you just charge it to the room? I suggested innocently. Mr. Ricci, the manager, told me we could put any incidentals on the master bill. He said he would settle it all up at the end of the night. Camilla's shoulders dropped 3 inches. Of course, she breathed. The room charge. Why didn't I think of that? She turned to the girl with her nose in the air. Put it on the room. Suite 401. The girl rolled her eyes but typed it in. It went through, because I had told Mr. Ricci to let it go through. I wanted the bill to be astronomical when the hammer came down. Crisis averted, or so they thought. Just then the door opened and Brad walked in. He was wearing his tuxedo but his tie was undone. He looked pale. He looked like a man who had been dodging phone calls all morning. Hey, he said, is everyone ready? We have to go downstairs. He looked at Camilla. He saw the sweat. He saw the panic. What is wrong? He asked. Your mother's cards are acting up, Camilla whispered furiously. Dragging him into the corner, they declined. We had to put the makeup on the room. Brad looked at me. He looked terrified. Mom, he said, walking over to me, is everything okay with the accounts? You know, the liquid assets. I smiled at him. I reached up and straightened his tie. Everything is fine, Bradley, I said. I just forgot a password. Old age, you know. But don't worry, I have the big gift right here. I patted the velvet envelope again. Brad stared at the envelope. He licked his lips. He looked like a starving dog looking at a steak. That is the deed, right, Mom? He asked. The signed deed. It is everything you deserve, I said. He let out a sigh of relief. Okay, good. Because, well, we have some plans for that property. Big plans. I bet you do, I thought. We have to go, Lexi shouted. She was standing up. She looked beautiful. She looked like a princess who would sell her grandmother for a pair of Jimmy Choos. The ceremony passed in a blur. I sat in the front row. I listened to them exchange vows. I listened to them promise to love and cherish. I wondered if they knew what those words meant. I wondered if they knew that love wasn't a transaction. Then it was time for the reception. The ballroom was magnificent. There were ice sculptures. There were towers of seafood. There was a 10-piece band playing jazz. It cost a fortune, my fortune. I sat at the head table. They had moved me from the back. Camilla had whispered to the planner that Grandma has the check, so put her up front. I ate my salad. I drank my water. I watched them celebrate. I watched Brad doing shots at the bar. I watched Camilla showing off her ring to her friends. I watched Lexi taking selfies with the lobster. They were drunk on my money. They were high on the promise of the envelope sitting in my lap. Then the music stopped. The band leader tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, it is time for the toasts. We have a very special speech tonight from the grandmother of the bride, Mrs. Eleanor Vance. The room applauded. Brad cheered. Camilla clinked her glass with a knife. Lexi looked at me. She pointed to the envelope. She mouthed the words, give it to me. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands were steady. I walked to the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the people who had laughed at my name tag. I saw the people who called me the ATM. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the velvet envelope. I adjusted the microphone. Hello, everyone, I said. My voice boomed through the speakers. I looked at Brad. I looked at Camilla. I looked at Lexi. They were smiling. They were waiting for their payday. I opened the envelope. I pulled out the single sheet of cream-colored linen paper. I didn't put on my reading glasses. I didn't need them. I knew every word by heart. They say you can't take it with you. I began. But tonight I am going to teach my family a lesson about what happens when you try to take it before I am gone. Honey, let me tell you something about silence. There is the silence of peace, and then there is the silence of a held breath. The kind of silence where 300 people are waiting to see if the money is going to drop. Standing behind that microphone, I felt 10 feet tall. I looked down at my family. They looked like baby birds with their mouths open, waiting for the worm. They had no idea the worm was a hook. I smoothed the piece of cream linen paper on the podium. It made a crisp scratching sound that echoed through the speakers. I cleared my throat. Family and friends, I began. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used to use when I fired incompetent vice presidents. I want to thank you all for being here today. And I want to thank my granddaughter Lexi for the beautiful name tag she made for me. At the rehearsal dinner, there was a ripple of nervous laughter from the bridesmaids. Lexi's smile faltered just a little bit. She shifted in her seat. For those of you who didn't see it, I continued. My seating card didn't say grandmother. It said the ATM. The room went dead silent. The nervous laughter died instantly. Brad dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against his china plate. I smiled, a cold, tight smile. At first I was hurt, I admitted, but then I realized something. Lexi was right. I have been an ATM. I have been dispensing cash for years, without asking for a PIN code or a receipt. And as any good businesswoman knows, an ATM eventually needs to be audited. I picked up the paper. So instead of a poem or a Bible verse, I have decided to share the results of that audit with you tonight. Since we are all family here, I am sure you won't mind a little transparency. Camilla stood up. Her face was the color of a beet. Mom, she hissed. Sit down, you are drunk. I am stone cold sober, Camilla. I said into the microphone, and I have the floor. I looked at the paper. I put on my reading glasses slowly. I let them sweat. When you invest in a business, you expect a return, I said. When you invest in family, you expect love and respect. But when I looked at the ledger last night, I found a significant deficit. So let's review the expenses, shall we? I looked directly at Brad. Item number 1, March 14th. A down payment for a Porsche 911, amount $45,000. Brad turned white. His friends at the groom's table looked at him. He had told everyone he bought that car, with his bonus. Item number 2, I continued. June 4th. Emergency medical procedure for Camilla. Camilla let out a strangled cry. She lunged toward the stage, but her dress caught on the chair. Amount $15,000, I read. Location, the Sanctuary Spa and Cosmetic Surgery Center. The crowd gasped. A low murmur rippled through the room. Camilla sank back into her chair. She covered her face with her hands. I wasn't done. I turned my eyes to the bride. Item number 3, I said. Study abroad program at the Sorbonne, Paris, France. Amount $20,000. Lexi stood up. Grandma, stop, she screamed. Stop it right now. I ignored her. I spoke over her screaming. Actual vendor Lux escape shot charters, Mediterranean. I looked up over my glasses. I must say, Lexi, I didn't know you could get a degree in tanning. The room was in chaos now. People were whispering, some were laughing. Mr. Anderson, the man from the rehearsal dinner, looked like he was having the time of his life. But I had one more number to read, the bottom line. Lexi was still screaming. She looked like a banshee in white satin. She was shouting for the DJ to cut the mic, and for security to remove me, but nobody moved. The security guards were too busy listening. The DJ was recording it on his phone. This was better than any playlist he had queued up. I tapped the microphone again. A sharp feedback whine cut through Lexi's shrieking. She clamped her hands over her ears and sat down hard. I am not finished, I said, and my voice was ice cold. I looked down at the paper. I added up all the loans, all the unauthorized charges, all the emergencies that were really just lifestyle choices. And do you know what the grand total comes to? I paused. I let the number hang in the air before I said it. $1,320,000. The room gasped collectively. It sounded like all the air being sucked out of the ballroom. Even Brad looked shocked. He had never done the math. He just swiped the card. Now, I said, folding the paper slowly, you all thought this envelope contained the deed to the lake house, the $2 million property that my husband built. You thought that was your final payday, the golden parachute that would save you from your own bad decisions. I held up the velvet envelope. I ripped it open. I pulled out the invoice I had printed that morning. I held it up for everyone to see. This is not a deed, I announced. This is a bill. Camilla stood up again. She looked like she was going to be sick. Mom, she pleaded. Her voice was weak. Please stop. People are staring. Let them stare, Camilla, I said. They watched you call me the ATM. Now they can watch me dispense the receipt. I looked at the three of them, my son, my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter. I am calling in the dead, I said. Effective immediately, I am seizing all collateral used to secure these loans. I am freezing all accounts. And I am closing the Bank of Eleanor forever. What does that mean? Lexi whispered. She looked terrified. It means you are broke, sweetheart, I said. And then I gave the signal. I looked toward the back of the room, where the large floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Hotel Valet Circle. I pointed a finger toward the glass. If you will all look out the window, I said, you will see my collection agents arriving now. Every head in the room turned. Outside in the bright afternoon sun, 3 large tow trucks were pulling into the circle. They weren't there for a breakdown, they were there for a repo. One truck backed up to Brad's shiny black Porsche, the one he bought with my business loan. Another truck backed up to Lexi's white Range Rover, the one wrapped in a big white bow for the wedding photos. The third truck blocked the exit. I saw Brad's face go slack. I saw Camilla clutch her pearls. I saw Lexi's jaw drop. I leaned into the microphone one last time. Happy wedding day, I said. I hope you enjoyed the free ride, because from this moment on you are walking. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that echoed like a gavel striking a block. I walked off the stage. I didn't look back. I walked straight through the silent crowd. People parted from me like the Red Sea. They looked at me with fear and respect. I walked out of the ballroom and into the lobby. I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. I could hear the screaming start again, but I kept walking. I had a date with a tow truck driver to hand over some keys. Now, ladies, I have seen grown men cry when their favorite football team loses a game, but I have never seen a man cry like my son Brad when he watched a tow truck hook a chain to the bumper of his Porsche. It was a guttural sound. It was the sound of a man watching his ego being dragged away on a flatbed. I stood on the sidewalk under the hotel awning. The valet manager looked terrified, but the repo men looked bored. They had a job to do, and I had the paperwork to prove they were allowed to do it. Brad came bursting through the revolving doors first. His tuxedo was disheveled. He was sweating. Mom, wait. He screamed. You can't do this. That is my car. I turned to face him. I held up the spare key fob. It is not your car, Brad, I said calmly. It is my car. The lease is in my name. You are just an authorized driver. And as of 5 minutes ago, I revoked that authorization. I tossed the keys to the tow truck driver. He caught them with one hand and gave me a nod. Take it away, I said. Camilla and Lexi came running out next. Lexi was holding up the skirt of her $10,000 dress to keep it off the pavement. She looked at her white Range Rover being lifted into the air. My car, she shrieked. How am I supposed to leave on my honeymoon? You aren't, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thin envelope. I handed it to Lexi. This is the only travel document you need, I said. She tore it open. She pulled out a cancellation confirmation from the travel agency. I canceled the Bora Bora trip this morning, I explained. The refund has already been applied to the principal of your debt. You canceled my honeymoon, Lexi whispered. She looked like she had been slapped. You can still go on a honeymoon, dear, I said. I hear the Motel 6 down the highway has a lovely view of the parking lot. Camilla stepped forward. She was shaking with rage. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure hate. You are a monster, she hissed. You have ruined everything. You have humiliated us in front of our friends, in front of our business partners. How are we supposed to show our faces in this town again? That sounds like a personal problem, Camilla, I said. But I wouldn't worry about showing your faces in town. You won't be living here much longer. What do you mean? Brad asked. His eyes were wide. I pulled out the final document, the one James had prepared for me at 3 a.m. I hold the private mortgage on your house, Brad. Remember, I lent you the money when the bank wouldn't touch you. Brad went pale. I haven't received a payment in 4 months, I said. I let it slide because I was the ATM, but the bank is closed now, and the bank is foreclosing. I handed him the notice of default. You have 30 days to vacate the property. I suggest you start packing. Maybe you can sell some of those designer handbags to pay for a moving truck. Brad dropped the paper. It fluttered to the ground like a dead leaf. Mom, he choked out, please, where will we go? I don't know, Brad, I said. Maybe you should have thought about that before you spent $45,000 on a car instead of your mortgage. Just then the hotel manager, Mr. Ricci, walked out of the revolving doors. He was holding a very long receipt. He looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Vance, he said, clearing his throat, I am so sorry to interrupt, but we tried to run the final charges for the reception. The card declined. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt all day. Oh, I am sorry, Mr. Ricci, I said. I canceled that card this morning. Mr. Ricci looked at Brad and Camilla. Well, he said, the total balance is $112,000. Who will be settling the bill? I pointed at my son, the father of the bride. I said, he has had a very expensive day, but I am sure he can work something out. Maybe he can wash dishes. I adjusted my purse on my shoulder. The tow trucks were pulling away. The Porsche and the Range Rover were disappearing down the street. The guests were spilling out of the hotel watching the spectacle. I looked at my family one last time. They stood there in their expensive clothes, surrounded by the wreckage of their own greed. They looked small. They looked pathetic. Goodbye, I said. I turned and walked toward the taxi waiting at the curb. Wait, Lexi screamed. Grandma, wait. What about me? I paused. I didn't turn around. You are self-made, Lexi. Remember, I said. Go make yourself. It has been 6 months since the wedding of the century turned into the bankruptcy of the decade. I am sitting on the dock of the lake house. The same lake house they wanted to sell to pay off their gambling debts and plastic surgeries. The sun is setting over the water, and the only sound is the water lapping against the wood and the ice clinking in my tea glass. I didn't lose a wink of sleep over what I did, not one, because when you cut off a gangrenous limb, you don't mourn the loss, you celebrate the survival of the body. James called me this morning with an update. He likes to keep me informed. He calls it the insolvency report. It turns out that when you take away the free money, people show their true colors very quickly. Brad and Camilla didn't last 3 months after the foreclosure. Without my money to grease the wheels of their marriage, the gears ground to a halt. They turned on each other like starving rats. Camilla blamed Brad for not standing up to me. Brad blamed Camilla for spending too much. They are currently in the middle of a very messy divorce where the only assets they have to fight over are debts. Camilla moved back in with her mother in a 2-bedroom condo in Florida. I hear she is working as a receptionist at a gym. It must be hard for her to answer phones instead of bossing people around. Brad is living in a studio apartment downtown. He had to sell his golf clubs to pay the security deposit. He is driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic. He called me on Mother's Day. He left a voicemail. He sounded sober. He sounded humble. He said, Mom, I messed up. I didn't call him back. Not yet. He needs a few more years of driving that Honda before he really understands the value of a dollar. And Lexi, my self-made granddaughter, well, she had to get unmade first. The husband annulled the marriage 2 weeks after the wedding. Apparently he wasn't interested in a wife who came with 6 figures of debt and no trust fund. Lexi had to get a job. A real job. She is working as a barista at a coffee shop near the university. I drove by there last week just to see. I saw her wearing a green apron wiping down tables. She looked tired. She looked real. For the first time in her life, she looked like a human being instead of a mannequin. Maybe there is hope for her yet. Hard work has a way of fixing the soul. As for me, I am doing just fine. I took the money I was going to spend on their lifestyle. The monthly allowances, the car payments, the bailouts. And I reinvested it. But not in stocks, and not in bonds. I invested it in myself. I renovated the kitchen at the lake house. I bought a small boat. I named it the Audit. I hired a gardener because I am 70 years old and I don't want to weed the hydrangeas anymore. I invited my friends up for the weekend, real friends. The kind who bring a casserole instead of an invoice. We drank wine and laughed until our sides hurt. We talked about our husbands and our lives. And we didn't mention money once. I looked down at the water. It was calm. It was deep. They called me the ATM. They thought I was a machine, but they forgot that machines have an off switch. And once you flip it, it takes a hell of a lot more than a fake apology to turn it back on. I took a sip of my tea. I am not an ATM. I am Eleanor Vance. And for the first time in 40 years, my account is balanced. Thanks for listening, ladies. And remember, check your receipts, check your relationships. And if the math doesn't add up, don't be afraid to close the account. And scene.